Hello, I am now live in the group, I think. Let me just check. Got my computer on behind me. Yes, I am live. So I'm just going to wait to see if Jamie can join me. Okay, and I will add him on here. And let me see. I haven't done this for a while. I'm using my phone today as opposed to the software that I've used, because with all the Facebook drama around privacy, the external apps are no longer functioning to broadcast live in the group. So I'm just going to tag him here, and hopefully he will join us, and we can get going on tonight's webinar. Okay, it says Jamie says I'm here and I'm ready. So Jamie, I'm clicking here and it says guest request. Allow your viewers to request to join you as a guest in your broadcast. So I can see you're there. Adding Jamie, and hopefully there you are.
I'm here.
This is fantastic. This works really well, doesn't it?
So, well, that remains to be seen, but I'm
last words.
Certainly open to the possibility. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
Yeah, so far so good, and I take it from your response you can hear me okay, so that means we're headed in the right direction.
Absolutely. We're headed in the right direction, and I'm hoping we're going to have a bunch of people join us today.
Cool, I see Marcia's here.
Yes, you're getting this quicker than I am. You said that before it popped up on my screen.
Oh, well, so, I may be closer to where Marcia lives.
I think you're maybe a few seconds ahead. Maybe I'm talking to the future.
Well, I'll see if I can send you any stock tips.
Apparently all it takes is seconds for me to make a killing. Then I can leave this whole coaching thing behind, right?
Start living the good life.
Absolutely. I have to say your beard is by far better than mine. This is about as long as mine gets nowadays.
I can actually, so on my screen, Marcia is in the way of your beard. I literally, my view of you is like this, peeking over Marcia's identity tag.
Well, you'll just have to take my word for it.
Okay. Well, and the funny thing is I've got it up on my screen as well, because I thought I would, so Dave said that my audio is really low and maybe I should use a headset with a mic. So why don't I go grab one while we're waiting for people to join? I'll be real quick.
No problem. It sounds fine in my headset. So I would be really interested. We've got a few people online. So if anyone else is finding the same, please let us know.
Dave, it may be your ears that are low.
Well, maybe it's just yours. So maybe he's just more attuned to my voice than your voice.
It could be. We will see. Hang on a sec.
So Dave's saying Kush sounds fine.
Oh.
You get to see into the future, but no one gets to hear you. I think that's the trade-off. Right?
Just a sec. Well, I'll plug mine in, and we'll see if this makes it different. Just a moment.
Okay.
All right, Dave Berman, is that any different? Can you hear me any better, Dave?
Either that, or we'll just have to have you shout or me speak really quietly so that it kind of balances out.
Or just encourage people to live with the imbalance.
Absolutely. Okay. Yes, you're now more equal.
Well, I'm all in favor of equality. So.
Yeah, maybe this is a really good metaphor. Maybe we set this up on purpose about different levels to set up a perfect metaphor for the background of this webinar today.
Well, I can tell you a metaphor that relates to it pretty closely, which is kind of funny actually, which is anytime I'm on the phone with someone and we start getting interference, like they start cutting out or whatever, I immediately assume it's them and their phone, not my phone. My
Of
phone's always
course.
fine. It's
Right.
them and their phone. And that is the ultimate, to me, that's a massive metaphor for this understanding. It's like, it seems like it's the other guy. It seems like, and for what had us having this conversation in a way is it's the most natural thing in the world that we assume that our feelings are giving us information about the things we're thinking about, the things we're pointing at, the things we're, ruminating on or whatever, when all the while our feelings are letting us know about our handset, not the other guy's handset. It's kind of interesting.
Well, let's start there. I think we're a few minutes in. I think people will be joining us over the course of the next hour. And I know we kind of set this up and we threw a title together, which I've put up on the top here, which is The Principles of a Thriving Practice. But actually, as I was kind of putting that just to keep it all, aligned to what we had said in the event page. But as I posted, I think it was yesterday or the day before, about us doing this webinar, what had this happen, what had this come about was I had some thinking around you and how you were showing up, and then I realized at one point, well, that's not an exception to the principles, and so we reached out and we had a conversation, and there's some really cool stuff we can talk about what came out of that conversation. But I thought what just made sense to me 5 minutes before we started this was to talk a little bit about that, because this is a group for coaches. We're happy to talk about everything around coaching and growing a practice, and people have heard you talk about it, they've heard me talk about it. But one thing that I've noticed and been aware of recently is, and I'm kind of just going to put this out there, and maybe I'll get some crap for this, I don't know, but I've done it. I'm sure we've all done it. We can get caught up in this whole thing of this person's not doing it right. This person's not doing it right. And I know that I don't think I'm the only one that had judgment on another coach. Right? And I think that for me, what's been really, really helpful is a reminder that, look, in this profession called coaching, right? No one wakes up, or especially I think in the 3P community, no matter what it looks like sometimes, right? No one wakes up and thinks, how can I make Sid Banks turn in his grave and completely, monetize this and go out after this in a greedy way and whatever. I don't think anyone's doing that. And there are lots of different ways that people are taking this understanding, coaching with it, they're doing therapy with it, they're doing business consultancy with it, all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And I think that's going to continue to grow. But everyone's really trying to do their best. And I wanted to start this off by saying, this doesn't mean you and I agree on absolutely everything. We don't. And I've had lots of different people on here who I really like certain things they've said, and that's why I've brought them on. But I think with every single person, we're going to have differences of opinion, and that's totally okay. But it's seeing that where we're coming from is the same. Go on.
Well, and I go even further, Ankush. Having differences of opinion is good. Like, we, as human beings, we kind of, in the world of coaching, we hear the word comfort zone bandied around a lot. But we kind of, there's a way in which, and we're all like this to some degree or another, we kind of like what's familiar to some degree. Like, I like, when I wake up in the morning, I like that I'm in the same room I went to bed in. I'm like, okay, that's good. We kind of like what's familiar, but we learn from what's different. I remember way back in 2012, someone who's made a huge difference in my life and yours, I believe, Dr. Keith Blevins. I asked him to have a look at the first draft of my first book, Clarity. So it was the first draft. And I thought he was going to I thought he was going to say, wow, Jamie, this is amazing. I see it just the same way you do. Can I write the foreword and endorse it? And he came back and said, no, this ain't right. This is cognitive. It's off base, da, 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 da. And I was like, I'm so glad that he didn't see it the same way I did. Because if he'd seen it the same way I did, I wouldn't have been able to learn from him. And by the way, I didn't like what I was hearing, right? Like, I thought when he was first telling me, here's what was not right with the book and that sort of thing, I was like, no, you don't understand. I thought that he was wrong and I didn't like it and it didn't feel good, okay? But then I saw, I was missing it. I've got to go back to school on this. I've got to sharpen the sword. I've got to be hitting this nail right on the head to the best of my ability before I put this out in the world. And I'm so glad that he didn't see it the same way as me. And then, by the way, since then, we've had countless conversations, and some things we still don't see eye to eye on. And long may that continue. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing as far as I'm concerned, because we like what's familiar, but we learn from what's different. We learn from what's fresh. We learn from what's new. And that's going to come from inside us, but it's often provoked by running into someone who's not singing the same from the same hymn sheet as we are. And I'm so grateful that that's happened every step of the way. When I first got introduced to this understanding, I was like, no, that's not right. And I'm glad that countless people have kind of hung in there with me and gone, no, just look at what we're pointing to here and see if that ain't what's going on. So, I think it's a good thing.
No, I love that. And it's absolutely true. I remember having a conversation with Aaron Turner. And I don't know if you've heard this, Jamie, but kind of Aaron's a very big advocate of it's all about grounding, right? It's all a grounding issue, etc. And you know me, you and I have had conversations about this 5 years ago, and I was like, Jamie, it's not all grounding, and etc. 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 And Aaron jumped on the phone with me, and I was there to convince him that he wasn't right. And we had this conversation, and I was like, well, Aaron, it's not really all grounding, and I see this and I see that. And he was kind of coming back and saying, well, what about this and what about that? And what was really interesting was at the end of the conversation, we kind of got to a place where I felt like he kind of, gave some ground, if you like. Well, okay, Kush, I see you've got a point there. And in my head, I went, yeah, right. I made my point. And then afterwards, for the next kind of few weeks, I really started realizing just how right he was and how some of it was, the words we might have been using were different. But even now, like a year later, that conversation stayed with me. And I think it's, one of the things that I see with the principles, and now we're kind of talking maybe outside of coaching a little bit, but one of the things that I found really valuable is having an understanding of this. If you really keep an open mind and you're really open to the fact that we're just experiencing life, from the inside out, is that I can have a conversation with someone with a completely different opinion to me and talk to them and actually really move forward, really come to some kind of, I've learned something from this. Maybe they've learned something from it. And I remember having a conversation a few months ago with a guy who's very, very pro-gun in the US. And I wasn't. I think most people in the UK are not pro-gun. And I kind of was like, really makes no sense people saying have guns and etc. But I started speaking to him and I noticed that I had less judgmental thinking on it. And I was talking to him and I was kind of, so why do you think that? And what about this? And when he was replying to me, I was actually listening to him. And I think he kind of felt that, like I wasn't judging what he was saying. And what happened is at the end of the conversation, I kind of got a better understanding of where he was coming from. And I learned things that I wasn't aware of and I didn't get to see in the media. But on the flip side, there were some certain things I said going, well, what about this? Like, you guys are even against, some regulation or this, that, and the other. And he kind of gave some ground, if you like, and said, "Do you know what? I would be willing to have this change." And I was like, "Wow!" Online, I've never seen him say that, because people get really entrenched in their positions. And I love what you said. We don't learn. And when people have got different opinions to us, different views, it's really such a good opportunity to learn there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing that strikes me as well, Kush, a lot of times people will say to me, and I'm aware that we've said this is the principles behind a thriving practice. So a lot of times coaches and principles coaches and change workers say to me, "Oh, Jamie, you're really good at marketing." And here's the thing, Kush, I'm just not that good at marketing. Apple are good at marketing. They're good at marketing. I'm just doing my best to reach people. But here's the thing that I'm quite good at. I'm quite good at seeing separate realities, seeing that we each live in our own unique, individual, thought-generated reality. And when I first came to this understanding, people were telling me it's really hard to get people interested in the principles. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is the best thing ever. That can't be difficult. That can't be true. It can't be true. And so what I discovered is it wasn't true. It was very straightforward to get people interested in it, but you had to be willing to step into their reality, to do the thing you did with the gun guy. You had to be willing to listen, and you had to be willing to find out, how does this person see the world? How does this person make up their reality? How do they think it works? And that's something, because I find people so fascinating, and so I really like finding out how they are making up the world, how their reality works. And I think that that's the thing that I have some, I won't even call it skills. I've just got some curiosity about. And so when I sit down to it's funny actually. So just before this call, I've decided I'm going to do a masterclass tomorrow night about how to get your first client. So I thought, that's kind of interesting. I'm pretty sure that's something people will be. And this may relate to what we want to talk, what we were talking about when we met up in London, actually, because I ran a masterclass last week, which is probably the antipathy. It's probably, I can't think of the word, the polar opposite of the message that that I would guess you would think would be helpful to give people. So, because the masterclass was called "How to something like the keys to enrolling a £50,000 client," which is, and that's kind of at one end of the spectrum of the thing we were having this conversation about. So we can open that up if you like. And so I thought, okay, well, for the other end of that conversation, let's look at how do you enroll your first client, and the fact that it doesn't matter whether that next client is paying you nothing, 50 pence, or £5, or whatever. Getting the next one through the door, getting someone into your practice, that is a seed that you're planting that you can grow. So it's kind of interesting that when I come to putting something together like that, like the one I did last week, but the one I'm doing tomorrow night, it's like, I wonder what would be interesting to people. How do they see reality? And how can I make it easy for them to look in the direction I'm pointing? Now, that's a bias, of course. Not every teacher wants to make it easy for people to look in the direction they're pointing, and that's fine. An old buddy of mine, Joe Riggio, I remember being on a course with him once, and Joseph talks in very in quite a technical, deep, sometimes difficult to kind of penetrate ways. Like, what's he talking about? And someone said to him, if you used less confusing language, it would be easier for people to understand what you're saying. And he said, why do you assume I want to make it easier for people to understand what I'm saying? And it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's not everyone's objective is to make it easy for people to look in the direction they're pointing. But that is one of my objectives. I want to make, I recognize that this understanding is kind of non-obvious. It's kind of, it's incredibly valuable and beautiful and powerful, but it's also easy to miss. And so I want to kind of, as best I can, put up signposts where people will go, oh yeah, there's something there. So that's a bias. That's an approach. That's not a principle or anything. That's just that's like a preference, you could say.
So you know what, this is so juicy because there's so many ways. I've got literally 4 or 5 different ways that we could take this conversation. And what I'm most interested in is the people watching. So if you guys have got a question for either Jamie or for me, let us know your question. That's going to be more juicy for you guys than it is Jamie and I speaking, right?
While we're waiting for them to type those in, one of the things I've really noticed, I noticed, you put up that post and I commented on it and we both said, ask questions. No one asked a single question. One of the things that's behind a thriving practice that I notice you and I are both willing to do is we're willing to make ourselves visible. We're willing to make ourselves visible to the people that we want to serve. So for anyone who's listening, if you want to take a step right now towards creating a more thriving practice, have the courage to be visible. Ask a question, type something in. Ask a difficult question. Ask a question that Kush and I will both be embarrassed by and or we'll sputter over. That would be great. Like especially one that would make Kush do that, for instance. But yeah, like hit us up because we're here to make a difference to you in whatever way we can.
Well, here's something that just occurred to me, right? Because it's great that you mentioned that. That was one of the threads that I had in mind around things that you do well, right? So whilst we're waiting for people to type in, I'm just going to go here. Here's something that maybe I know about you, or I think I know about you, that maybe people don't know. And it's something that I learned from being around you for a while. And I think I wrote this in one of the comments on the thread. One thing that I learned about you is that I think everyone sees you're not shy about coming forward. It's like Jamie Smart's everywhere. Right? You're willing to put yourself out there, make yourself visible. One thing I didn't realize until maybe training with you for 2 years was you're not immune to criticism, right? And this is something that I've been discovering myself as I've been more public. And I've had people say to me, I wish I was confident as you. And I think what I see is, this is certainly true for me, I don't like being criticized. I would love everybody to agree with me. I would love everybody to tell me, Kush, you're great, we love you. But that's not how it is. Now, as my misunderstandings, I've got misunderstandings around that. I know I have. They've been falling away. As they fall away, criticism affects me less and less. But I'd be 100% lying if I said it doesn't affect me, right? I'd 100% be lying. And I noticed that with you too. I think a couple of years in where you did something and I remember giving you some really good feedback and you turned around and went, Kush, I really appreciate that. And I remember thinking, why does Jamie give a shit what I think? He's this 3P teacher. Everything's neutral, right? But there's that humanness. And I think part of growing a thriving practice, like you say, is and thing that you do really well, and I've really learned from you, is not waiting until you're perfect, not waiting until you're not impacted by this, not waiting until you have so much grounding that you can show up and be visible and not be bothered by what anyone thinks. It's just doing it.
And it's interesting, Kush, when I first started doing this stuff and getting out there with it, I had teachers who will remain nameless who were saying, hey, Jamie, why don't you wait till you understand this better before sharing it with people? It's like, and how it looked to me is like, look, I can share this now to the best of my ability, knowing that 6 months from now, I'll look back at what I said and go, oh, or like it's kind of funny, actually, on my computer, I've got a recording, which I haven't made public in many, many years. And it's called something, I can't even remember what it's called. It's called something like Introducing Your Wisdom and Well-Being or something like that. Anyway, I recorded this in like March or April of 2009. So we're talking 9 years ago. This was my first experiment teaching the principles. Maybe I'll share it actually. So literally, a group of 7 or 8 of my buddies were around at my place. We were hanging out and stuff. And I said, hey, I'm exploring this new stuff. Would I be able to share it with you? And I talked to them for 30 or 40 minutes and I recorded it. Now I know I haven't even listened to that in years, right? But I'll know that if I did, I would be embarrassed to hear a lot of what I was saying. However, I also know that by that point I'd already seen something that was making a difference to me. And that's what I was endeavoring to share. And you know, you can imagine, I teach this to coaches and trainers and all kinds of other people. And then I see them going out and sharing. And I actually make it possible for them to share it with other clients and that sort of thing, knowing that it's going to be, patchy in places and they're learning and that sort of thing. But how else are you going to get better at it? Like imagine if you tried to learn to walk without trying to take any steps. You say, I'll wait till I'm a really good walker, then I'll try walking. It's like that wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I look back myself at my own journey, and it's exactly the same. There's so many, like, 1 step forward, 2 step back, right? Like it's you try something, you mess up, you learn from it. Some things work out. You think, yeah, I've finally got this, and things didn't. So no, I love that. Right, we have a question, I think. So Niels, I had that in the beginning as well. The coach told me my grounding wasn't good enough, kept me running in circles for a good while, trying to get the principles better, whatever that means. Lately, I've started to see that I'm enough to take myself less seriously too.
And you know what occurs to me, Kush, as I read Niels's post, I was thinking about the thing that you were saying earlier about, Aaron's comment that it's all grounding. And there's a way in which that's true, like if I look at, but like for instance, you drive a car, right, Kush?
Yeah.
So you have a good grounding in how driving a car works, including gravity, stopping distances, all that kind of thing. Now, if someone knows the principles but doesn't know how to drive a car, I bet you'll be a better driver than them. But they can learn to drive. But to me, grounding is an understanding of how something works. Not just, when I talk about grounding, I'm not just talking about grounding in the principles. For you, for instance, my guess is you have a far deeper grounding in how to create a coaching practice than you did 10 years ago. And you probably have a deeper grounding in how to create a coaching practice than a whole bunch of principles teachers who learned the principles 20 years ago, right? And
Probably true, yeah.
And so there may be people who have a deeper grounding in the principles, but don't have a deeper grounding in how to create a coaching practice. It's coaching practices exist in the world. They're a thing. So it depends what people throw this word grounding around, but it depends what you mean by it. To me, grounding means an embodied understanding of how an aspect of life works.
That
how close you are to reality.
I think the car example, the driving example is a really good one, because here's something that I used to be really embarrassed about. It took me 6 times to pass my driving test. Right? I kept failing. But here's the funny thing. I still passed my test within a year of me learning to drive, right? And maybe this maybe says something about me. I really wanted to learn to drive, so I'd go for my test and I would fail, and I'd always fail on like a stupid thing. Like I should have passed the first time, and something would happen, I'd get distracted or something and I'd fail. But what I would do is I would phone up the driving test place and I'm like, have you got any cancellations? Because they'd always get people cancelling their test. And so I was literally having tests every two to 4 weeks. So I managed to get through like 6 tests in a really short space of time to pass my driving test, right? And I did
I
it
like
by
it.
my 18th birthday, right? That was my aim. Like when I'm 18, I want to pass my test. And it's true. I learned so much by just going for the test and going for the test and learning and driving and learning and driving. And I see so much, in business, in coaching, in the principles. It's about that. It's like kind of showing up, doing it, testing it out, and then learning from that, and then going again, and then going again, and going again.
Now, check this out. I love that example, by the way. That's how I got over my fear of public speaking. Did like 20 presentations in a month. Boom. But check this out. There are people either watching this right now or who are going to be watching it on the replay. Now, you and I are doing a Facebook Live. A year ago or 2 years ago, no one in the world had done a Facebook Live. We've jumped in, figured out how to do it, and we're doing it. Not worried about people seeing us or whatever. That's grounding. That's grounding. So anyone who's watching it, there's no skill missing and no technology missing that means you can't do a Facebook Live. If you can watch a Facebook Live, you can create a Facebook Live. The only thing that's ever going to stop someone doing a Facebook Live, aside from ropey internet, is insecurity. Feelings of insecurity that they believe are coming from somewhere other than thought. So that's grounding.
I've got a question for you, right? So we've
Sure.
had a lot of discussions on the group over the last few days, some really interesting discussions. One of the discussions was started by Leanne, and Leanne said, why do you think why is it that 90% of coaches are making less than 20 grand a year? Something like this. And let me give I'm going to give some preamble to this, right? So I think one of the things that you and I do agree on is that we both see, so you have got a very strong desire for more people to learn the principles and get out there, right? And for me, that's something that I would love to see too. I think most people that come across this understanding want it to be more widely understood, you've spelt Leanne's name wrong, but that's okay. Lian, right?
Oh, that Leanne.
That Leanne, you know her, right? So, yeah. So a lot of people who come across this understanding really want it to get out there in the world. Now, I think one thing that we both agree on is that it's not the only way to do it. There are numerous ways this understanding is being spread and being shared, but one of the ways is through coaches. And I think one of the things that we both agree on is if there were a bunch of people who were trained as coaches with this understanding, that would do quite a lot to share this with other people, to get this out there, for people to get impacted, right? Now, I think we both agree on that. That's something that we're both agreed on.
Yeah, absolutely.
The problem is whether people are 3P coaches or they're non-3P coaches, it seems to be a thing that impacts coaching. And in fact, I remember one of the first things you ever told me about coaching was that most coaches don't make money, right? And you said that. Do you still want to go into this profession? I remember that conversation. I went, sure, I still want to give it a go. Why is it that you think that most coaches are struggling, whether they're 3P coaches or non-3P coaches?
I think there are several reasons, and they don't just apply to coaches. They apply to lots of people. But I don't know. This is going to be a certain amount of kind of ideas and opinions rather than principles. On one level, it's like stop and think about it for a sec. Most of us have been conditioned for having a job, okay? And so what I've noticed is actually the move you have to make to get to the point where you're effectively running your own business or running your own practice, there's a kind of, I don't know, whether you want to call it a leap of faith or taking ownership or taking responsibility or something like that I see as uncomfortable for a lot of people. And plus, another thing I've seen with a lot of coaches, and I'm shooting from the hip, so this is just, you're just going to get whatever's coming out, is if you think about what qualifies someone or what makes someone a good fit to be a coach, they're going to be very people oriented, very connection oriented, very open, very interested in new ideas, that sort of thing, especially a principals coach, right? But if you think, what are the things that make you successful as a coach? It's going to be being industrious, doing stuff that you don't feel like doing, working hard, that sort of thing. Now, not necessarily all those all the time. But what I find with a lot of coaches, they've often been in a job where they were required to be industrious, required to do all that stuff. And then they go, I want to be a coach. And they get sold on the idea of being a coach with something along these lines. Well, how much can a coach charge? Well, 50, 60, 70 pounds an hour. Well, think if you were charging even 50 pounds an hour and you work 20 hours a week, that's 1,000 pounds a week. Well, that's, 48 weeks a year. Well, that's 48,000 pounds. Like a lot of people have done that in the NLP world and the hypnotherapy world and that sort of thing to paint a picture of making a living as a coach that doesn't mention the fact that, hey, there's a whole bunch of new skills that you're going to have to learn. Okay? And so when coaches discover that there are a whole bunch of new skills that they have to learn, and not only that, but those skills are probably going to be being deployed in areas where they have certain insecurities. For instance, like I'll give you an example. I did I've got, this is kind of just a thing I say, but what I find a lot of times when coaches come to me complaining that they've got a livelihood issue, and by livelihood I mean sales and marketing, how to get clients, how to enroll clients, all that sort of stuff. When I scratch the surface, it turns out to either be an impact issue or a grounding issue. Now, both of those are actually grounding, but here's what I mean. Either they've got insecurities about their ability to make a difference to their client and to charge for it, to make the difference that the money will be paying for, or they've just got insecurities about money, about themselves, about who am I to do this and all that sort of stuff. Now, what I often find, I'll give you an example. I did a poll in my group and I said, what's the number one thing that you think would make the biggest difference to your impact on your clients? And so there was this poll with a whole bunch of things. At the top of the list was rock solid confidence and certainty. So people like, that's what I need. If I could just have that rock solid confidence and certainty, I would be able to knock it out of the park with my clients. So that had 80 votes or something. At the bottom of the list with one piddly little vote was total certainty about your client's innate capacity for realization, resilience, clarity, creativity, thriving, all that stuff. And that's the thing. I looked at that and I was like, holy shit. The fact is, a 1% increase in your insightful understanding of your client's capacity for realization, for peace of mind, for healing, for all of that, a 1% increase in that is worth 1,000% increase in your certainty and confidence.
I love that, and you're right. It's what people don't see that they don't see it themselves, and it can be the challenge, right? Because that's kind of what we're looking for. I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, I don't have 100% certainty, in everything that I do. It's exactly what we were talking about around showing up anyway. But what I do have is, I have certainty in the principles. I have certainty that if someone gets a deeper understanding of how life actually works, there's no way that's not going to have an impact on them. That's got nothing to do with me. It's got also nothing to do with them and how they view themselves. It's about a fact. I love that.
And that's what I'm saying. Like here's what I'm absolutely not talking about. I'm not saying I'm Jimmy Smart and I go around being totally certain about myself and I have total self-belief, and that's bullshit. That's not much use to anyone. What I'm talking about is my certainty, the truth of how it works, the truth of how our experience is created, and the truth of who my client really is. That there's nothing wrong with them, that there's, that there's nothing missing from them, that they're already enough. Now, does that mean they're already a championship golfer? No, but they're already enough. Who they really are is already enough, and who they really are is connected to this intelligence and this resilience and this clarity, and there's a way that the mind works and there's a way it doesn't work, and knowing that, like having clarity about that, that's something you can hang your hat on. That's like a compass point that you can use to orient yourself, whatever's going on with you and whatever's going on with your client. That's what I'm counting on.
We've got about 20 minutes or so left, and again, if you've got any questions, please ask. We're happy to answer anything that you guys might have about anything. Nothing's off the table, like we said. And while we're waiting for any questions do come through, Jamie, just as kind of this last third of the call, one of the things that I found recently, and maybe this kind of ties in nicely to the post I wrote before I did this around reconnecting with you and stuff. One of the things that I found, and as well as creating a practice, one of the things I found is when we're judging other people, we forget they're human, right? We forget that. The other thing is when we judge ourselves against other coaches, or that person's doing well, we also forget they're human. And one of the things that I found both helpful to me is seeing the humanness of my mentors and my coaches and my trainers. And what's been really helpful for my clients is for them to see my humanness. And I would love if because people might have this image of you, right? Like what you just said. Oh, Jamie Smarts walks around with certainty and he's got all this confidence and he doesn't get affected by anything. And we kind of touched on this, but I would love you to share, because I know you a little bit better and I know that's not what's going on, but people might have this impression of you, right? And maybe of me too. And I would love you to share kind of, do you get insecure? Do you still get insecure? Do you still have blind spots?
All the time.
Right? Like talk a little bit about that. I'd love to hear that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And by the way, feel free to ask me absolutely anything. Anyone who's watching this, ask whatever you like. Like at the very least, it'll be funny when I stumble over an answer that I found embarrassing. So ask me whatever you like. But I absolutely get insecure about stuff. I can get insecure about anything. I remember I went out to LA to give a talk to a group of entrepreneurs. And I woke up the morning of the talk. So the night before, I'd been to some kind of soiree at the place where the event was being held. And I'd met all these entrepreneurs. I'm like, oh my God, they're all, multi-gajillionaires and they created all these amazing things and that sort of thing. I woke up the next morning and I was first up to do my talk at like 9:30. I was first up. I woke up at like 7 in the morning and I was like, oh my God, I'm such a tool. What do I have to tell these guys? They've accomplished so much more than me, blah, 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 blah. And for like half an hour, I'm like pacing around my hotel. I'm not sitting there going, this is thought in the moment. I'm not seeing it at all. I totally got my head up my ass. I'm going, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. This is going to be a tumbleweeds talk and all that sort of stuff. And literally after 30 minutes of properly sweating it out and trying to think about what am I going to do and worrying, am I thinking, all sped up, full half hour, it suddenly occurs to me, where do you think your experience is coming from? I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, literally, in a heartbeat, I fell out of it. And I fell present. I fell back into out of la la land and back to reality. And the moment I did, I was like, oh, I'll tell them about this. So that experience was the first thing like that I told them about when I got on stage. Like, never guess what happened to me this morning. Ba 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 ba. And so immediately, not only did wisdom or reality or the principles, however you want to describe it, get me back on track, but it also gave me the thing I didn't think I had. So yeah, but here's the thing, Kush. That kind of thing happens to me all the time. Like it'll happen to me before the day is out in some way or another. Maybe not for that long, or maybe for longer. Like I can get properly caught up. But one of the things that's made a big difference to me since getting this understanding, I don't need to feel good to take action and move forward. And I see a lot of people in the principles community particularly waiting to feel good before they do stuff, waiting for the right feeling, waiting for the right feeling before they start. And you don't need to wait.
I'm laughing because I literally had one of those moments today. I kind of had a moment of clarity and just calmness and clear mind, and I reached out to the old CFO of this very large organization I used to work for. This guy was literally my boss's 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 boss. He's probably one of the most senior people I've ever reached out to. And he said something. I met him a couple of times, and he would kind of have this thing, and his thing was, you know what, Ankush, or he'd say to a group. He wasn't necessarily talking to me, to a group. He'd say, you know what? He goes, what I'm really interested in is, up until about 30, people are very, very brave in their careers. They take risks. They're entrepreneurial, and they don't mind, and they go for it. And he goes, when people are in their 50s, they do the same. But he goes, in the intervening years, he goes, they're very, very risk averse because they've got a mortgage and they've got a family and they've got kids. And in their 50s, the kids have moved out, and so they become entrepreneurial again. And he goes, what I'm really interested in is how to get people take risks in the intervening years, right? I totally forgot about this randomly today, right? Haven't spoken to the guy, haven't seen him for years, for literally 7-8 years. It came to mind, oh my God, yeah, I know why that is. It's because people have a misunderstanding. And if he wants his employee, and this guy's moved on and he's got promoted and he's even more senior now, right? And I was like, oh, if he wants his employees to not be like this, right? He needs to help them have, to see the principles in action. Otherwise, any tools and strategies and techniques are not going to work. So in this moment of clarity, I reached out to him. Didn't think anything of it. An hour later, I get a message off him. Wow, you remembered what I said to you, right? And double wow, right? Something else. Yeah. Let's talk on Friday. What's your number?
Double wow, you've reached out to me even though you're over 30.
Right? And he's like, let's talk on Friday. And I had this moment of, oh shit, what have I done? He's going to talk to me. Now what do I do? Right? And it's so funny, right? Like, I love that you said that. This is a daily occurrence that we go through moments of clarity.
You bet.
And then moments of like, oh crap, I've bitten off more than I can chew, or whatever else.
Sure.
And it's not this. I had someone say to me last year, Ankush, it's easy for you. So this is the other thing I want to talk about. So there's that. The other piece is an assumption, and I don't know if people have this about you, Jamie, right? So I've had someone say this to me, right? They think that now you get to a certain stage in your career, in your practice, that clients just roll in. There's nothing you have to do. You just kind of show up and that's it. I had someone say to me, Ankush, it's very easy for you to talk about X, but you've made your business. And I was like, are you kidding me? That's kind of not how it works. Could you also talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience anyway, and there may be other ways of doing it, but part of the process of growing, and actually this relates back to what you were saying about why do so many coaches struggle to make a decent living and that sort of thing. So my way of thinking about it is it's about capacity. So we each have a certain capacity for dealing with hassle, receiving money, paying bills, being visible, all this sort of stuff. We got a capacity. Now we can expand that capacity. In principle, we can expand it without limits, because the capacity, so-called, is only made of thought, right? It's just our ideas about what's okay for us. Like, I bet everyone who's watching this at some point or the other has had that sense of, who am I to do this? You know, or is it okay for me to do this? Well, that's a capacity issue. Like, I haven't had any thought tonight of, who am I to talk with Ankush to this group about whatever? But I bet, I don't know, 20 years ago, I would have been sweating bullets about it or whatever. So, and that's what I had before talking to those entrepreneurs in LA. Now, that's a capacity issue, but it's just made of thought. But what I find is, a lot of people, once they come up against one of those thought capacity bumpers, they just go, oh, well, that's me. I can't, whoopsie daisy. Apologies for that rude interruption. I guess I've got a capacity for flapping my gums. Only joking, I don't. But they run up against the capacity issue, which is just another way of saying uncomfortable thinking that has them believing they've reached the edge. And I remember a beautiful quote. I'll see if I can find it. It was from John Lilly, and he was a LSD experimenter, and the guy who invented, I believe he was the guy who invented the sensory deprivation tank. Anyway, he was a physician, a neuroscientist, a psychoanalyst, a psychonaut, a philosopher. He said, in the province of the mind, what one believes to be true is true or becomes true within certain limits to be found experientially and experimentally. These limits are further beliefs to be transcended. In the province of the mind, there are no limits. Now, it seems to me that these principles that we are passionate about sharing with people, they describe the way that the mind works. But there are no limits to what's possible within the mind, within that. So any of those capacity limits that people run up against, they're just further beliefs to be transcended. They're just thinking. The only issue is they look like there's more to it than thought. And I've still got them, you know, I've got new ones or whatever, and you have, and that's okay. It's just thought that doesn't look, thinking that doesn't look like thinking. I'm going to have to go at 5-2, by the way.
No problem. Just before we finish,
I've got a time capacity.
No, just before, I want to just quickly squeeze us in. Can you give us an example of one of those capacity issues that you have right now? I think that would be really helpful to people to see that with you.
What would be one for me right now? Okay, well, I'll give you an example. I love doing the stuff that I love doing, like doing Facebook Lives, talking to groups, coaching people, that sort of thing. But I don't much enjoy things like, I don't know, business strategy or figuring out how to, you know, work better with my team and all that kind of stuff. Like, those are learning curve for me. They're new stuff for me to learn. I've been trying to do a bunch of stuff with social media. Some of it's been working quite well, and some of it isn't working that well, and it needs processes and systems if it's gonna. That's hard and uncomfortable, and I'm not excited about it.
I can see from your face.
It's like, well, you can either do it, find someone else to do it, or not do it. What do you want? It's like, and sometimes, you know, sometimes the answer is, okay, I'll sack it off. And other times the answer is, okay, I've got something to learn here. I've got something to grow through here. I've got something to discover here. And one of the things that really helps me is remembering that my feelings aren't letting me know about those things. They're just letting me know about thought.
Cool. Right. I'm aware of your capacity restraint. If someone has been living under a rock and they don't know how to get hold of you, right, how can they do so?
A couple of ways. jamiesmart.com is the easiest way. My Facebook group, the Profitable Coaches Group, I'm doing a lot of stuff in there at the moment.
And you and I are going to be speaking in that in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, we're going to be speaking there in a couple of weeks' time. And my podcasts, I've got the Profitable Coaches podcast, the Results Mindset podcast, and all the usual social media places. My handle's JamieSmartCom. Yeah, I'll be all over that stuff.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm really glad you were able to do this, and we're having this conversation. And yeah, I'm looking forward to you and I speaking in a couple of weeks to your group.
Yeah, same here, man. Looking forward to it. Be well.
All right, take care. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.